Hi, welcome back. This is our second tutorial on setting up our character. Within this tutorial we're going to focus on creating some weapons and allowing the actual challenger player character to actually use those. There's a couple of different ways we can use weapons. We can either have them already loaded onto the character. We can also pick them up off the ground, and the third way is to actually have an inventory system set up that we can load a number of different weapons into and have them pulled out as we need them. For this particular little bit of the demo, we're just going to focus solely on creating a weapon and having the character hold that weapon and being able to access it. In order for us to do that, we need to create an Invector weapon. So we're going to go up to melee combat again, components, and we're going to create a weapon manager through this weapon holder manager here. So I'm just going to click on that, and what that has done is created this object down here. Now this will allow us to actually set up an inventory later on. The other thing we also need to do is we actually need to create a weapon itself. So we're going to go back to melee combat, create melee weapon, and it's going to bring up another little window like it did when we created the actual character itself. And what we need to do is load a model into here. Now if you come into your into the library, drag it out so you can actually see, scroll down, there should be a number of different weapons in here, so I'm just going to scroll down until we find one. So you can see there's like the V-axe, that comes with the Invector package, so it's probably not really one we want to use. There should be a challenger sword in here somewhere. Certainly an axe, that might work for us. Oh, there it is there. So let's use this one here. So sword V, and we will create that. So there it is there. Let's pull it out. Double click on it so we can see it. Now what you'll notice, it's got this big yellow box around it. That essentially is the actual hit box on it. So if we just open this up, there's the hit box. So this is the part that actually senses when it's actually hitting something. We can play around with that through the scale, so we want to make it so it's actually the same size as the sword, and overlaying the sword correctly. So I'm just going to move that up on the D axis, focus in a bit more on it. You'll need to move around a little bit so you can see that it actually extends below the ground here. So just make sure that when you set that up, it's only the actual sword itself. It still needs to come up a bit on the Z. I can either drag these or set them manually. I probably need to make this just a little bit bigger on the Z axis as well. So something like that. Come back onto the top view. Now, I suppose the other thing I could do too, maybe this might be a good idea, is to only focus on the actual blade itself, so that when you are hitting, you're only doing damage when you hit the blade. And I just need to make that the width of the blade as well. Doesn't matter if it's just a slightly bit bigger, but there it is there. So that's now my hitbox sorted. Now you can see over here on the actual weapon itself, this is all the information about what damage it does, the actual attack moves it does. So attack ID down here, I'm going to change this to 1, and the movement set to 1 as well. And what that means is basically it will change the character from being, if you remember from our last tutorial, this fighting, punching sort of character, to actually using a whole set of other animations that are attached to it that will allow it to actually swing the sword and look like it's actually using the sword. The sword itself is only an attack weapon, in that it's not a shield, and our damage modifier, let's put in 10. So that's how much damage it's going to do when it hits something. Okay, so that is pretty much set now. What we need to do is now move it onto the player. Now if I open up my player here, I need to find his right hand. So I just need to come down through all these parts. Sorry, not this one here. And we need to follow his body down to his right hand. So the hip, we're going to find the spine, right arm, strapped armour, so we just follow, I don't know, where are we? Here we go here. So right challenger, shoulder, right arm, right forearm, right hand. Okay, and there we are. Now the other thing here, we also have this challenger right hand prop. We can use that in there as well. So, but what we're essentially doing is attaching it to this part of the character. So my sword, this is a little bit different in this Invector, so we might just try dropping that onto there. So it's attached to this right hand prop now, but what we need to do is also move the sword into the right position. So I'm just going to drag it up to where the character is. And we're going to move it across into his hand. So it's a little bit manual, this part, but it's alright, it doesn't take too long. Just keep zooming in and out. You want to get it so it's actually sitting in his hand. He'll actually close his fist around it once he realises he's got a sword in it, but you won't see it until you actually go into the actual game itself. It's just a matter of getting it into position. And when you're happy with it, it's good. Now for me, I'm just going to add a little rotation on that as well. So it brings it around this way. And I think the sword probably also needs to be kicked up just a little bit too, just so we can get it sitting on the right angle in his hand. Okay, so that looks like it's pretty close there. Just come back around here. Maybe just a little tweak back out that way. Okay, so that's pretty close. So within his hand now I'm going to try this right hand prop. If I press play now, you can see it hasn't attached at all. So that's fine. All we're going to do is just come back here and grab this, and I'm actually going to grab it up onto his hand where I thought it should have had to go to start with. Let's press play now. And you can see now he is holding it just by dragging it onto his hand. Now if I use my mouse button, you can see now I've got a set of 3 different sword movements. Okay, so what I want to point out here, if I come back, these were originally set to 0. Let's just go back and do that, and if I press play now, I just want you to understand, see if he doesn't have those, if we don't put the number 1s in, he's still using those original fight moves even though he's holding the sword. So that's why that change was important. We need to have attack set 1 and movement set 1 in there. Okay, so that's pretty much the sword setup. Now how about we try a shield? So a shield's still a weapon, it's just a defensive weapon, so we're going to go up to Invector again, melee combat, create weapon. We're going to come into here and we're going to find a shield. Now, interesting, there's a shield there, it hasn't actually got texture on it, but we'll use that one. We're going to create it, and just like the sword, it will create down here. There it is there. And because it's a weapon already, we need to give it those attack sets again, 1, and we're going to use this one for defense. Damage modifier is 0, it doesn't actually damage anything. And just like the sword, we need to now move it into position. So we can drag it up here, double click on it. Now the first thing we're going to need to do using the rotate tool is obviously rotate around onto the right angles. So we're going to move it so it sits on his forearm here. Something like that. Now what you might also decide is that this thing's a little bit too big, so we can use our scale tool, drag it down a bit and just make it that touch smaller. Now just like the sword as well, this has got a massive hitbox on it. I probably should have done this before we moved it, but that's alright, we can do it at this stage too. So what I can see is obviously it's far too thick, so I can reduce the Y height of it, and I probably don't need to be too worried about the X because that's pretty good now. So while it's not necessarily exactly the same shape, that'll work for us. Okay, now same deal. Rather than having the sword in the right hand, we now have a left-handed weapon. So I just need to follow this down, challenge the right shoulder. Let's close that one up because that was the sword. We want to go down to the left shoulder now. Come down, and we want to find the hand, or the forearm in this case. Maybe that might be a better thing to hook it up to. So let's go to the forearm. Right, and there's our shield in there, all set. And notice if I close that up, there it is there. So it's now under the forearm. Now, of course, what I can with this, we have a few different materials here. Why don't we try sticking something on it, just so it gives it a little bit of a more interesting look. I'll just drop one of these textures on. It's going to let me do that. Alright, no, that's alright. We'll just leave it how it is for now. Rather than trying to dress it up, let's hit the play button. Let's just test whether or not this works. So you can see right there, it's sort of a little bit out of position, but it's linked to his forearm. Let's just stop that, and let me just rotate around here and just see what that is actually doing from the back side. You can see here that it probably just needs a little bit of movement. Oh, still on hitbox. Make sure I move the actual mesh itself. Okay, I think that's alright. So let's just hit the play again. Okay, so it's now sitting in a better position, and you can see if I use my right mouse button, I get a shield move there. Now he's also using the sword as a bit of a defensive one as well. That's alright. But we have now something that we can actually use to block enemy attack. Now I still need to play around a little bit with this positioning of it, but you can see pretty much what it's doing. Okay, so that is where we've got to get to now. In order to actually save any of this, notice that all this section here is blue. This is our prefab that we created. Remember we created that prefab ready? Here it is here. If I select the top of the hierarchy here, which is the player challenger prefab, go into game object, apply changes to prefab. You'll see in my prefab down here, my changes now include a prefab with a sword. Okay, so this is where I want you guys to get to now, please.